$25 million a year. Now they're paying $1.5 billion a year. So a pretty big gap. Average viewership of Thursday Night Football on the NFL Network and Fox grew 22% over the first 14 weeks of this past year, compared to 7% overall. 30-second commercial prices as a whole in the NFL increased 15% in as recently as October. So this all makes a lot of sense, yet we have programming going everywhere else. We have program going OTT, we have program going direct to consumer. So if the golden cow is still golden, why is everything else happening? Let's start with, why are we going from this legacy environment that still seems to be working? Why is there a push going to these other places?
Go.
I think I can't speak for the whole panel, but I think for us, I'm Patrick Dees, the co-founder and chief gaming officer of the Fan-Controlled Football League. And when we started looking at what platform we were going to partner with, it made sense for us to be obviously direct to consumer, but our whole league, it's Madden essentially in real life. We are literally building a football league where fans control every aspect of the game. They choose the logos, the mascots, the colors, head coaches, cheerleaders, all of those things, but they call plays in real time, right? Literally playing a video game and real live humans on a field are running those plays. And the whole thing's gamified, right? You're competing against other fans to see how well you do in real time. And for us, it was necessary to be able to interact directly with our fans, right? So taking advantage of interactive overlays that exist on platforms like Twitch and Mixer and Caffeine, those types of things, were integral for us to be able to implement that real-time feedback that we wanted and need in the league. So,
do you have a primary? What do you consider your primary platform?
We're on Twitch.
Twitch is going to be primary.
Correct.
Okay, and then you're going to add in the others around it.
Well, so in Twitch, we're looking actually at a lot of bumper content on the other platforms. I mean, Twitch acquired the broadcast rights for the streaming rights for the first couple of years. So
got it.
Games will live there for sure.
Got it.
Yep. And for me, with it's actually Gamer World News. I just noticed it said World News. But for Gamer World News, I mean, we wanted to be out, obviously DTC for basically to take the news and chop it up in 1 to 3 minute premium solid news, covering the entire gamer spectrum, from professional to competitive to casual games to mobile to girls of the game to teams, leagues, publishers, and gossip, rumors, reviews, and health and tech and all that, health and psych. And so it was only natural to go to an online presence just to establish ourselves, but certainly to that audience that wants to get their content how they want it and when they want it. And with OTT, I think, coming to a place of significance in the tipping point by 2021, they're spending $6 billion in technology. It's going to have to demand what I think is a partnership between legacy and OTT. They're going to have to work together to be successful. And I think OTT is the clear winner as we move forward.
Yeah. I just want to add, what really strikes me is that for really going back to your question, is the world of sports, professional sports, collegiate sports, et cetera, and the ecosystem of fandom, I think for decades sort of lived in parallel. And there just weren't a lot of ways in which they could sort of connect and interconnect and exchange, et cetera. And I think really the simple answer is that all forms of technology that have emerged over the course of the last, call it 15 years or so, have unleashed the ability for these worlds to intersect. And I think that's incredibly exciting from a content perspective. It's incredibly exciting by virtue of how it enables fans to really feel more connected to teams, to players. And from that, you can just imagine the endless number of opportunities that are already being explored. But ultimately, we are way early in this game. But I think ultimately, it's the technology that's allowing the passionate fan to be far more involved and connected with the things that they're passionate about.
So if we look just at the relationship between legacy, the broadcast networks, DirecTV, and the OTT, let's leave direct-to-consumer out for the moment. Are they friends? Are they foes? Are they collaborators? Is one going to eat the other? Where do you see this going over the next 3 to 5 years as most of these deals expire? The NBA deal's got a couple more years, NFL deal, all these deals are coming up over the next few years.
So I'll just say quickly that, look, the term co-opetition has been around for a long time, right? And nowhere better sort of embodied than here, because the fact of the matter is that there are layers of fan experience, there are layers of viewership experience. I truly believe that there's an accretive aspect to this, because it's nothing changes as fast as people think it is with regard to consumer behavior. It's not like everybody wakes up one day and starts to behave differently. They start to incorporate it into their life. There's a fluidity to it. There are new ecosystems that evolve. And so I believe that there will be, at scale, significant numbers of people who continue to want to have a passive viewing experience, or even times of a day when you want to have a more passive experience. And there are other consumers and other times of the day where people are going to want to be more active, more involved, et cetera, et cetera. And so it opens up the ability for there to be many different layers of experience that satisfy the different layers of consumer behavior.
I mean, I agree. I also think that sometimes I look at legacy and OTT as an age-out proposition, whereas we see the market growing in OTT and this service and that service and how you get your content and how you want to get your content, and invariably it's all here. But at the same time, legacy still has a place. They're just going to have to figure out how to play nicely with OTT, I think, especially for sports as we move forward.
Well, what's interesting is the younger demographic doesn't just want to watch a game. If you're 25 and under, you don't want to just watch a football game. You want to be actively immersed in the football game. Yeah. You want to be challenged and stimulated all the time. So I call it the gamification of sports. Right. Because that's really what that audience wants. So I may want to watch a football game and just watch the game. But someone who's half my age wants to watch the game and have 3 other things going on. So is it a multi-screen experience, or is it just everything is plugged into one single environment?
I will say at CES, I don't know if any of you saw this year at CES, but literally Samsung has come out with a huge screen where you literally can watch the game and you take your phone and you tap it on the side of this side of the screen, and you could have your messaging, WhatsApp, you could have your email on maybe 25% of the screen. Yeah. The thing is, like, whose phone are you going to watch? I know my husband would not.
I'll tell you just one example that really lit me up. 2010, when together with the team I had at the time, we were preparing for the first time to live stream all 64 matches of the World Cup in South Africa. And up until that time, viewing experiences for large-scale events of that kind, whether it be a football game or whatever, the viewing experience was separate from how people interacted, communicated, messaged, et cetera. And so I approached Facebook and, for the first time, integrated Facebook Messenger into the video player environment so that you could be communicating with your friends on the same screen while you were watching the match. And simple thought, but the power of that was extraordinary because it brought community and viewership together for the first time for any major event. And the reaction that I saw and what we saw in terms of the volume of exchanges was really the thing that just lit me up and opened my mind, I think, much more broadly to the importance of connecting the fans with the experience, which then opened the door to actually realizing that the fan experience outside of the actual match or football game or whatever is this whole other powerful platform. And people don't realize the ecosystem. I'll just pick an event, Paris, the French Open. There's what goes on the court, and then there's this whole world of fan experience that goes on all throughout Paris around what's going on the court. And so for the first time, you can actually connect the dots. And I saw, I think it was the Tennis Channel, did a fabulous job creating an entire micro content experience around the actual tennis matches, and the volume of the content that was non-court specific was consumed at almost an equal rate to what was to the actual match on the court.
Wow.
That's really cool. I think what you asked about, like you said, like, is it going to be a 2-3 screen experience? I think on a long enough timeline, it will all be a single screen interactive experience. And you engage with it to whatever degree you want to, right? I agree with you. There are going to be like much more passive times when you want to be passive. And I think we're building our league to ensure that you can engage with it to whatever degree that you want to. It can be accessible. If I want to lean back, I'm just going to watch sports, I can do that. But if I want to lean forward, call plays, go on streaks like Call of Duty, and to your point, have the whole thing be gamified, I'm competing about other fans, like you both will be accessible through a single screen. And I think that excites me a ton, right? Because you talk about this gamification, like you play the tapes forward 2 or 3 years, it's not only players that will be recruited to other teams, but other fans, right? That are calling plays, that are engaging, that are directing teams. And there'll be this contention of like pulling fans from other teams and lobbying for them, so.
I'm actually I've been fascinated by what you guys are doing for about the last, year and a half.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot. But I'm also interested in kind of comparing and contrasting that to what the XFL is doing. So for those that don't know, the XFL, which is the new iteration of Vince McMahon, WWE, relaunching the XFL, it's launching this weekend.
Yeah.
And it's an 8-team league. There'll be 4 games every weekend. And they've changed a number of the rules, ranging from the kickoff, which the teams are lining up 5 yards from apart from each other. I actually put on my Deep Sports blog, there's a link to a CBS Sports did an overview of what the XFL is doing and kind of a guide to it. You can find it there or just look it on CBS Sports. But I'm curious, specifically for you, Patrick, because your venture is a truly immersive experience for the fan.
Yeah.
The XFL feels like they're going a little bit away from, a little bit further than what legacy football is like, and then as you guys are taking still a giant step. Have you looked at the XFL and kind of looked at what they're talking about doing relative to what you're doing?
I mean, you can't be in this game and not look at what Papa Vince is doing with the XFL. I mean, so yes, very much. And I think like, maybe it's an overabundance of confidence, but I think that they are literally, our models are diametrically different, right? They are the NFL light. Sure, they're changing a few rules, sure, but that model is still butts and seats and selling those butts, beers, and hot dogs. We are literally playing on a sound stage. We are playing in a television studio. There's gonna be 600 people live, and we have an audience that scales endlessly digitally. And we're monetizing those fans as they want to get engaged and those mechanics. So while I think they're doing some innovative things, I still think games are still 3.5 hours long. Like they are a running clock, which I agree, but like I don't think anybody wants to consume, like I love football and I don't want to watch a 3.5 hour football game, right? Like I think games that we're running, games are an hour long. That's how people consume content. I think they've got a blind eye to how, like what you were talking about, how and where people want to consume that content. I think they're literally doing the bare minimum to differentiate themselves from the NFL. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I happen to be a Pro Beach volleyball fan. So the AVP a number of years ago changed their rules from what they had was called side-out rules, where you'd side out and points were only scored when you had the serve. And they changed it to the FIVB rules, which was you get a point whether you serve or not. And it sped the game up a lot because they realized that people were not wanting to sit and watch a long hour-and-a-half match. Yeah. They wanted it, and make it more television friendly. Is that where we're going? Is sports going to start bending to become more video friendly? I mean, listen, you're a legacy TV guy. You're a legacy TV person. I am as well. Is sports going to bend itself because the money and the exposure and the audience is there, or is the video world going to bend themselves to the kind of classic rules that a sport has?
Well, I think the answer, in fairness, is both. I mean, even large, established institutions like ESPN were innovative in ways that I don't think they get credit for, right? And I recall, gosh, I don't know, had to have been at least 10 years ago, going to their production facility and seeing, for the first time, rather than, the web experience using the scraps of, the TV experience, right? And we all know, people running around trying to figure out, like, what are you not using that I can throw up on a website?
Right.
Which is what I mean by scraps. I saw something really quite impressive, which was that they were taking, that they were actually shooting for different formats, because you shoot different for 3x5 than you do for whatever. And they were actually doing post-production in the same room on multiple screens of different dimensions to really start to understand proportionally and otherwise what the best viewing experience would be on these different screens. And so, there's like an established legacy player who was trying really hard to think about how to embrace these different kinds of viewing experiences. And the harsh reality is that people let go of things, in the absence of giving someone a new rope to hold on to, they're going to hold on to the other one about as tight as they can till their knuckles turn white, right? And that's really what's happened in the world of sports and sports rights, which is because if you can extract, this enormous amount of money for sports rights, every negotiating cycle, you're going to hold on to that for as long as you possibly can, until the ecosystem around you, by way of consumer behavior, technology, and information, forces you to let go and embrace something new. And so at the end of the day, I think there's a consumer dynamic, I think there's a technology enabling dynamic, and we haven't even talked about data, which is really nothing short of extraordinary, and it was extraordinary long before they put the word big in front of it. But that is a today, here and now, powerful tool to super serve me as someone who happens to be a crazy sports fan, like serve me in ways that I could never be served before. And all it does is increase my loyalty, increase my engagement, and increase the ability to monetize me.
Gail, in the esports world, data is, I wouldn't say data is king,
Sure.
but data kind of is king.
Right, and I think also, esports came along, probably around 10 years ago. People started paying attention more so in the last 5 years. But I think that when you look about that experience, it's certainly going to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. I mean, that's where it lives. That's where people are, getting their content. It's nothing to pick up Twitter and watch a live stream. I mean, I've done it. I've watched all kinds of sports on Twitter, and I think to Kevin's point, he's saying, they're going to hold on really tight. But I hate to say it, but it's kind of an age-out thing. I think we're going to see it shrink to the point where legacy is going to be forced to find some kind of intermingling. They won't forever go away, because it's just not in my lifetime anyway, I don't think. But I think that's kind of where it is in esports, because it came in so much further after legacy. It adopted it very quickly.
So in a 30-minute panel with a topic this big, you can't do justice to just about any topic, but I think I would be remiss if I didn't at least bring up gambling for at least a minute or two. So just curiosity by show of hands, how many people have or like to gamble on sports?
Who's gambling right now? I feel like somebody out there is checking. Yeah, exactly.
Somebody.
I had a hunch it was you, but I wasn't checking.
Well, but how many of you are gambling on sports more because of the legality, the access that you now have that you didn't have before? Does that make a difference?
That's a different question. You asked that in New York or New Jersey.
That's true. Okay, so there's not gambling in California yet. Not yet.
But in New Jersey, it's insane already. The handle's $500 million or more.
Right.
And now it's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania as well.
Let's assume that it's going to be here eventually at some point. Is anybody watching sports now with more interest because of the red access to gambling? Brian, you?
Yeah, I do. I have a particular app that I love, and I'm signing on to it, so full disclosure. But I think what's interesting is the gameplay on all this in-game betting.
Right.
That's where it's like really interesting, and there's certain dynamics that'll play out. But I don't think anyone's figured it out just yet, right?
So I've interviewed the CEO of Sinclair, which owns the Tennis Channel. He says tennis is the second most bet upon sport in Europe, so I think that's great for them. But B, he said 70% of the play is in-game betting. So a game like soccer, I mean like tennis, is beautifully set up for that with all of the breaks and all that. And so is football, and so is baseball.
Most sports are. So the potential corruption of the sport aside, okay, which is a whole other panel that we can do some other time. No, it's a problem. It's potentially a problem. But how does that impact, or does it impact the question of programming, rights issues, the protection of the integrity of the sport, maybe a nicer way to say it? How do you see that playing out? I mean, across any sports, whether it's your professional area or personal interest, where does that impact?
Look, I personally think the whole gambling, discussion, debate, debacle, whatever you want to call it, I think it's a big red herring. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, people have been placing wagers of all kinds on all kinds of things for 1,000 years. And if it perhaps is more common, or there's more passion around it with sports, just by virtue of the fact that sports tends to bring out, the passion in people. Just listen to sports talk radio for a minute, and gosh, people have opinions, right? So I realize that it's a complicated topic, and I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I do believe that it's a red herring, because at the end of the day, people are going to be passionate about what they're passionate on. They're going to be confident that their team's going to win, or some other team isn't going to win, or some player's going to win, whatever. And I think it's a completely natural thing to want to wager on that. Hopefully it happens in a responsible way, and people don't, do what they do in Vegas and lose their home. So I think there are some guardrails that need to be put up to sort of protect people from themselves. But it goes on all around the world. In the United States, look at the lotteries. Come on, it's part of the ecosystem of how people live their lives and choose to spend their money. And as long as it's done in a reasonable, responsible way with some guardrails, I think it's just like, let it go.
Patrick, Gail, are you of the same mindset?
I think when it comes to esports and professional play, I think you're going to see maybe an uptick in the live arena. I think when you're sitting in an arena with 20,000, 40,000, 70,000, 80,000 people watching a League of Legends tournament, you could be persuaded to place a bet, especially if you're in the stadium. I think it's a little more difficult yet. I don't think we've seen, an esports betting uptick for a while. I don't think it's going to be there for a little bit. Like I agree with the panel couple before us in that, people put a lot of money into pro esports, and now we're finding out that the runway's a lot longer than we thought. I think it's the same thing with betting, but I do agree with your point. I think when you have an app and you can sit there and vote kind of in an anonymous way, it's tempting. Now, whether that bet's for an esports, enthusiast, maybe between the ages of 18 and 35 or 21 and 35, if they can be on an app and vote and blow a $5 or $10, I think it's going to happen. But it's going to take. It's got a long runway to go for traditional sports. I think all bets are off. I think it's really gonna, you're gonna see much more of that, just because I think the anonymity is a big issue. I wouldn't want to, I remember my uncle calling his bookie. So, that was like, ooh, and going to pick up the money. I kind of knew sort of what was going on as a kid, but, it's a little different now.
So let's, unfortunately, there's a limited amount of time left here. Let's kind of look forward, okay? There's new deals that are going to be made. The networks are not going away. In fact, some of the networks that are not in particular sports are now wanting to get back in again because they recognize sports is one of the only ways to aggregate eyeballs at this point in a broadcast way. Facebook's been a player, Amazon's been a player, Twitch is a player. You know, DAZN is a player, Fubo is, you know, everybody wants to play. Where do we look at 3-5 years down the road? What are we looking at? Are leagues going to go just direct to consumer? They're going to bypass these middle people and just go direct to consumer and start making deals with individual subscriptions? Are they still going to be aggregating? They're still going to be getting legacy? Just kind of put your crystal ball on it.
I would think of it, I would just offer, I would think of it like concentric circles, right? And that there, as I tried to say earlier, that there are behaviors that will continue to be best served via an at-scale, large, call it, you know, broadcast kind of linear-ish model that's all about reach and exposure and maximizing the ability for people to have access to some kind of viewing experience, passive or otherwise. Then as you come towards the bullseye, you add layers of interactivity, you add layers of different types and formats of content that are able to be distributed and consumed differently on different devices. You have the intersection of, or rather the rediscovery of true community. People forget that it was community that actually built the web, right? Chat rooms, forums, actually built the web. And when I left AOL a long time ago, there were still, on average, something like 8 to 10 million people active daily in any given hour in the chat rooms and forums. And so, you know, what we know of today is social, with all due respect, is not community. Social is not community. Social and community are two completely different things. So the ability to rebuild, rediscover, re-engineer true community through the use of technology, and then layer on top of that the actual intelligent use of data to construct value propositions that serve me uniquely is a hugely winning formula. And that will inform how anyone who's a rights holder or a content creator or someone who's looking to build the next, you know, technology widget, those should be the lens, or those should be the lens through which they look to how to create the next generation of value.
Patrick, any thoughts?
I think incredibly well said. I could listen to Kevin read the phone book. I'm telling you, I'm just fascinated. And you know, I stopped listening actually after the point where you said you were at AOL and the amount of money I spent or my parents spent in those paper-minute chat rooms. Yeah, I got you. And I think it was incredibly well said. I think it's going to be. The good news is I don't know that we know, right? I think there's a lot of best guesses, but I think, and you see people placing bets and hedging, right? And so I think what we do know is that I think fans want more access and use of technology. So I think it's like how do we bring fans closer to the game? And obviously we've got a solution to that, but it's interesting to see like where people are going with it.
Yeah, and I think it's just everything they've said, and just creating the best user experience is the way to go. And if you can crack that code, you're going to win. Yep.
I think that, what a great note to at least end Arthur, if there are questions, but what you just said, like consumer first.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know, that's like, it should be so obvious, but it's not said often enough.
Right.
You know, so.
Thank you, Kevin.
Great, very well said.
So we're just about out of time. One quick question maybe. Anybody have a question? Scott?
So things are definitely changing, particularly now we have the NFL is in Las Vegas, which many people thought wasn't ever going to happen. Things are shifting as the consumers are looking elsewhere. As you mentioned, the changes by age and by classification, but you do still see some of the traditional players like ESPN doing some things to prolong their success and their market share. Who among the players right now do you think is doing it well to maintain the broadest audience, not just in 2020, but is actually laying the foundation creatively from a technology standpoint to build that audience long-term in the sports world? Who's doing it well and is an example for those that are trying to build their audiences?
So just in the interest of time, maybe just identify one quickly that you think is outstanding more than others.
Saying a league? Is the question which league?
It could be a league.
I think MLB is doing a better job than the other major leagues. And what I mean by that, obviously, is sort of NFL, NHL, NBA, et cetera. My vote would be for MLB currently, although obviously there's still crazy amount of opportunity.
Right. Patrick, is there one that jumps out at you?
I'd echo that. Yeah, they're clearly aware of like that they're aging out of their demo. I would echo that MLB is doing some really neat stuff, or will be.
Gail?
I mean, for me, ESPN has been such a huge brand over the last 42 years. I think they're somebody to watch in terms of the amount of power and legitimacy they bring, but there's going to be a shift there with new partners and new experiences, I think, for ESPN, beyond storytelling, beyond live. That's where they're going to
Just
go.
one final thing is, I actually think that the opportunity the flip side of it is who's missing out the most now. I would argue that it's football, meaning soccer, as a global sport, reaching more people than anyone else. And I can't even find a place, if I just want to watch Ronaldo, I don't care about anybody else on the field. Why can't I just watch Ronaldo?
I'd watch Ronaldo.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like, so
Wash his hair. Just
I don't care what Ronaldo does.
Global sport, biggest reach, biggest platform,
So
biggest
true.
opportunity, and doing the least with it.
And just
Yeah.
to end this, I'll give you a data point. So soccer is the most popular sport in the world. It has, the last numbers I saw, it had 4 billion fans worldwide. It is number one. And what? And most bet upon as well.
Yeah.
There you go. Please join me in thanking our panel. Thank you for being
Thanks,
here.
guys.
Hopefully do it again.
Thank you to our panelists. Our final session, advertising and the 2020 election, will begin in a few minutes. Thank you.